Every morning I wake up at 5 hours and 30 minutes. Exactly at 5:30, without an alarm clock. My old bones are long past the need for electronic reminders. 77 years of life have developed their own clocks, more accurate than any Swiss movement. My house on Barrett Avenue looks unremarkable. One story with neat siding and a small but well-kept front garden where I grow asters, my favorite flowers. There are a lot of houses like this in Brunswick, built in the 50s, when the town was just starting to grow. My neighbors think of me as an ordinary pensioner, living modestly but decently. They don't realize that my restraint in everyday life is my own conscious choice. After a light breakfast, oatmeal with nuts, fresh fruit, and a good cup of tea, I put on my usual outfit. A simple but high-quality dress in muted colors, a classic jacket, and comfortable handmade leather shoes. I add minimalistic silver earrings and a watch, the only jewelry I wear daily. A soft leather bag, an elegant hat with small brim. My closet is small, but every item in it is of impeccable quality and will last for years to come. My son Wesley, with his passion for flashy designer logos, has never understood this philosophy. At 6:15, I get into my Volvo, not new, but impeccably maintained. The car starts instantly, running as reliably as it did 10 years ago. I've always chosen things for their quality and durability, not for the sheen of newness. The city at this hour is just waking up. Brunswick isn't New York. Here, everything starts later, more measured. I drive through streets slowly filling with morning life. A young woman with a thermos mug running into a bakery. An elderly man walking his dog. Teenagers waiting for the school bus. The ordinary life of an ordinary city. 20 minutes later, I park near my restaurant. I never leave my car right at the entrance, an old habit. Part of my unspoken rule not to publicize my association with the establishment. I always walk the last leg of the journey, changing my route. Today, I choose the road through Central Square Park, with its century-old oaks and neat benches. There it is, the Wild Cherry Restaurant, a 3-story red brick building with large windows and an elegant sign. At this early hour, the lights are on only in the kitchen, where preparations for the new day are already beginning. I enter through a side entrance, specially outfitted to remain inconspicuous to prying eyes. "Good morning, Miss Alina," Thaddeus, the night guard finishing his shift, greets me. "Good morning, Thaddeus. How was your night?" "Without incident, ma'am. Same as always." I nod and head to my office on the second floor. Here, behind the oak door, lies a world unknown to my family. A spacious room with an antique desk, walls hung with restaurant awards and photos depicting the history of Wild Cherry. One of my favorites is a black and white photo from 50 years ago. Me, a young woman with a determined look standing in front of the tiny diner that was the beginning of everything. Taking off my coat, I sit down at my computer. Modern technology has long been a part of my life, though Wesley is sure I barely know how to use a cell phone. I review yesterday's reports, check my reservations, study the financials. Things are going well. Even better than well. The Wild Cherry is thriving like never before. At 7 o'clock, Rose Ames, my executive director, a middle-aged woman with a sharp mind and organizational skills I can only envy, shows up on the doorstep. "Good morning, Alina. You're early today." "As usual," I reply, even though we both know I'm 15 minutes earlier than usual. "What do we have today?" Rose lays out the paperwork in front of us and we get to work. We discuss supplies, staff, menus. Half an hour later, Phoebe Nightingale, our chef, joins us, a short woman with strong arms and a personality that makes the entire kitchen crew tremble. "I need your approval on new dishes for the fall menu," she says without preamble, handing me a folder of photos and descriptions. I scrutinize each proposal, asking questions, making adjustments. Phoebe patiently explains, sometimes arguing, defending her vision. Our creative tandem has worked this way for 15 years. "Okay," I finally say. "I approve. But let's change the presentation of the duck breast. We need something more elegant." At 8:30, I go down to the kitchen. Here, already boiling work. Junior cooks cut vegetables, prepare sauces, marinate meat. I watch the process, sometimes ask questions, taste the sauces. Everyone treats me with respect, but without excessive subservience. I am not a poor old lady here, but a hostess who has created this world with her own hands. "Good morning, Mrs. Hampton," says Liam Barrow, a young cook who is in his second year with us. Would you like to try this new sauce I've invented? I do. The flavor is rich with unexpected notes of cardamom and citrus. Interesting, Liam, but too complex for our menu. Our guests appreciate sophistication and simplicity. Try taking out the cardamom, amp up the citrus notes. He nods, not taking offense at the criticism. Everyone here knows that my word is law, but I am always ready to listen to new ideas. At 9 o'clock, I go up to the dining room. Waiters set the tables, polish glasses to a shine, spread starched tablecloths. Everything must be impeccable. Wild Cherry isn't just a restaurant, it's a theater where every detail counts. Mrs. Hampton, Oliver Baxter, our maitre d', a man with the impeccable posture and manners of a British butler, addresses me. We have a special reservation for tonight. The Kingsley family is celebrating their wedding anniversary. How many guests? 12. They're requesting a center table. I wonder. The Kingsleys are a powerful family in Brunswick, owners of a chain of hotels. Important clients. Good, clears throat. Prepare a special menu. And flowers, white lilies and roses. They always order them. Oliver nods, making notes on his clipboard. He's worked with me for almost 20 years and knows all my requirements. At 10 o'clock, I return to the office for a video conference with the suppliers from California. We are discussing the purchase of wines for the fall season. I insist on special terms. Wild Cherry deserves the best. Time flies by. At noon, the restaurant opens its doors to the public, and I change into a more formal outfit, a dark blue dress with a pearl brooch. Now I look like the owner of a prestigious establishment, but as usual, I do not appear in the hall. I watch through a special camera system installed so that I can see every corner of the restaurant. Dinner time passes without incident. The restaurant is half full, a normal picture for a weekday. I spot a few regulars, make a note to send them compliments of the chef. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I leave the restaurant through the same side exit. I change into my regular clothes in the car, becoming a regular retiree again. None of the customers even realize that the elderly woman getting into the inconspicuous car is the owner of the place where they just had lunch. On my way home, I stop at a grocery store. I buy some vegetables, bread, and milk. The cashier smiles friendly. How are you doing today, Mrs. Hampton? I'm fine, Doris, thank you. My house greets me with silence. I put the kettle on, take the mail out of the drawer. Bills, flyers, and an envelope with the bank's logo on it. A monthly report on my accounts. The figures impress even myself, though I know exactly how much my business is worth. The phone rings. My son's name pops up on the screen. Hello, Wesley, I say, sitting down in the chair. Mom. His voice sounds strained, as if talking to me is an unpleasant chore. How are you? I'm fine, thanks. How are you? How are Sheila and the kids? They're fine. Mom, I'm just calling to remind you that we're expecting you for lunch on Sunday. I can hear the falseness in his voice. Those mandatory Sunday lunches once a month are a formality, a propriety. Sheila insisted on them when she and Wesley got married 5 years ago. Family traditions are important, she'd said then with a strained smile. But I've seen her wrinkle her nose when I visit their fancy house in an upscale neighborhood. Of course, darling, I'll be there. At 1 o'clock as usual? Yes, and Mom. He pauses. Why don't you wear that blue dress I gave you for Christmas? It's, more modern. I press my lips together. The dress he gave me is garishly bright with gaudy rhinestones. It was picked out by Sheila, convinced that an old lady needs to add color to her life. We'll see, Wesley. See you Sunday. See you. I hang up the phone and sit still for a while, staring out the window. My son, my only child, is ashamed of me. Ashamed of my supposed poverty, of my lifestyle, of my old-fashioned habits, in his opinion. He has never been interested in my affairs, my thoughts, my accomplishments. To him I am a burden, a reminder of a past he would rather forget. Long ago, when Bradley, my husband, was still alive, we decided that our son should make his own way in life. No privileges because of the family business, no undeserved luxuries. Bradley died when Wesley was only 12, and I continued to raise my son the same way. Maybe I was too strict. Maybe I should have shown him what I'd accomplished, opened the doors to my world. But now it's too late. Wesley grew up selfish and shallow, married an equally shallow Sheila from a good family with money and connections. And now both of them look down on me, thinking I'm a poor relative they want to stay away from. I get up and walk over to the dresser where the old photos are kept. There's Bradley, young, smiling with a twinkle in his eye and ideas that seemed crazy to everyone but me. Here we are together opening our first diner, a tiny space with 4 tables and ambitions the size of the universe. Here's Wesley, a little boy with a serious look, so much like his father. I sigh and close the album. The past can't be brought back, but the future can still be changed. I don't know what the next few days will bring, but I have a feeling things will change soon. Sunday morning greeted me with bright sunshine and an unsettling sense of inevitability. The day of the family dinner is a test that I prepare for like a soldier for battle. Today, I chose a beige dress made of fine wool, elegant but discreet. Pearl earrings inherited from my mother and a thin ivory wool cardigan completed the look. Nothing flashy, just the understated elegance that had always been my choice. My son's house is located in a new neighborhood in Brunswick, where each building looks more expensive than the last. The 2-story mansion with columns and French windows, the impeccably mowed lawn, the marble statues in the garden, everything screams status and wealth. Wesley bought the house 3 years ago when he married Sheila Roberts, the daughter of a construction company owner. "Starting a new life, Mom," he said then, and I heard in that phrase the unspoken. "A life with very little room for you." I parked my car next to Wesley's impressive Lexus and Sheila's silver sports car. My Volvo looked foreign here, too modest, too functional amidst all the ostentatious glitz. At the front door, I took a deep breath, gathering my strength, and pressed the bell. The melodic trill echoed somewhere in the back of the house. Sheila opened the door a few seconds later, a slender blonde with perfect makeup and a look of perpetual discontent on her pretty face. "Oh, Alina," she said with a strained smile. "You're right on time." Sheila never called me mom or mother-in-law, always only by my first name, as if to emphasize the distance between us. "Hello, Sheila," I smiled back. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she gave me an appraising look. "And you?" "The same style." I followed her into the spacious living room, where every piece of furniture seemed to scream its price. Wesley was sitting in a leather chair studying something on a clipboard. At my appearance, he looked up and smiled. Not warmly, but politely. "Hi, Mom." He stood up and hugged me awkwardly. "How was your trip?" "Fine, darling. The roads are clear today." "Have a seat, Alina." Sheila pointed to the couch. "Can I get you some tea or maybe some white wine?" "Tea, please. No sugar." "I remember," she replied dryly and retreated to the kitchen. Wesley returned to his clipboard, occasionally glancing at me, as if checking to see if I was about to do something inappropriate. "How's your work going, son?" I asked, breaking the awkward silence. "It's okay," he shrugged. "A lot of projects right now, trying to close a deal with investors from Boston." Wesley worked for an investment firm, and every conversation we had always centered on his big deals and important clients. He never asked how I was spending my days. "How about you?" he asked, as if he'd remembered to be decent. "Are you doing okay?" There was an indulgent concern in the question, as if I were a helpless child. "Quite well, thank you. My days are filled with activities." Sheila returned with a tray of fine china cups and a silver teapot. "Here, Alina, your tea. The cups, by the way, are from a new set. Hutton and Rose brought them all the way from London. Wesley bought them as a gift for our anniversary." "They're beautiful." I took the cup carefully. "And the tea is excellent." "It's organic oolong," Sheila said proudly. $80 for 50 grams. But we can afford small pleasures, can't we, dear?" Wesley smiled indulgently. "Of course, dear." "By the way, Mom," he suddenly perked up, "we've renovated the guest bathroom. Would you like to see it?" I knew it wasn't so much an invitation as an invitation to show off another improvement to their luxurious home. "I'd love to," I agreed. We walked down a wide hallway lined with expensive paintings in massive frames. The guest bathroom shone with marble and gold faucets. "Italian tile," Wesley announced proudly. Sheila had chosen the design herself. "Very impressive," I said, thinking about how much money had been spent on a room that hardly anyone used. Back in the living room, We found that Sheila's parents, Howard and Vivian Roberts, had joined us. Howard was a heavy-set man with a red face and imperious manners, and Vivian was a carbon copy of her daughter, only 20 years older. Elena, Vivian nodded at me with the same strained friendliness as her daughter. It's good to see you. Likewise, Vivian. I smiled back. Hello, Howard. Howard mumbled something unintelligible and then turned to Wesley. Listen, did I tell you about that real estate investment opportunity downtown? There are such prospects there now. The men plunged into a business conversation, completely ignoring my presence. Vivian and Sheila were discussing the upcoming charity ball, which by the looks of it was going to be attended by all the high society of Brunswick. Surely you don't attend such events, Alina. Vivian turned to me with a touch of sympathy in her voice. No, I don't, I answered calmly. It's very tedious, she continued. All those expensive outfits, the jewelry, not everyone can afford it. And not everyone can afford it, Sheila added with a slight chuckle. It requires a certain education. I took a sip of my tea, keeping my expression unruffled. These women truly believed that the world revolved around their social gatherings and designer shoes. They had no idea that I could buy their entire closet without noticing the difference in my bank account. Well, it's time for dinner, Sheila announced, glancing at her gold watch. Our new cook had prepared something special. We moved into the dining room with its huge oak table and crystal chandelier. Sheila seated me between her and Vivian, away from the men, who continued their business talk. Lunch was indeed excellent. Asparagus soup, duck breast with cherry sauce, risotto with truffles. I ate slowly, savoring every bite and mentally noting that our chef at Wild Cherry cooks just as well, perhaps even better. Alina, how did you like the food? Sheila asked, obviously expecting enthusiastic compliments. It's very good, I replied sincerely. Especially the duck sauce. It's an interesting combination of cherries and rosemary. Sheila looked a little disappointed at my restrained response. Our cook was poached from a Michelin-starred restaurant, she said proudly. Not everyone can afford such an expert. Indeed, I agreed. Good chefs are worth their weight in gold. After the main courses, dessert was served. An exquisite chocolate mousse with raspberry coulis. The conversation at the table turned to the discussion of Wesley and Sheila's recent trip to Europe. Paris is beautiful in the springtime, Sheila said enthusiastically. We stayed at the Ritz, had dinner at Le Meurice. Alina, have you ever been to Paris? Yes, many years ago, I answered, with my late husband. Oh, Sheila looked surprised, as if she couldn't imagine that I had ever traveled. And where did you stay? A little hotel on the left bank. Very cozy place. Probably something budget, Vivian suggested with a hint of condescension. When we were young, we saved money too. I didn't say anything, remembering my room with Bradley at the Hotel Lutetia, one of the most luxurious hotels in Paris. But why ruin their perceptions of me? After dessert, the men retired to Wesley's office to discuss business, while we women stayed in the living room with coffee and liquor. Alina, Sheila began, scrutinizing my outfit, I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. Maybe you should update your closet. At your age, it's important to look modern. Sheila! Vivian feigned indignation, but her eyes showed approval. I'm just looking out for Alina, Mother. Sheila smiled innocently. In our circle, looks matter, and I wouldn't want our family to be judged. I'm fine with my closet, I interrupted her calmly. But thank you for your concern. Of course, if it makes you feel comfortable. Sheila paused. Just think about Wesley. He cares about what his family looks like. At that moment, the men returned to the living room. Wesley looked pleased, as if he'd just made a good deal. Mom, he turned to me with sudden enthusiasm. We have news. Sheila and I have decided to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary. A big celebration at the end of the month. Congratulations, I said sincerely. 5 years is a big date. Yes, and we want to celebrate it big, Sheila said. We booked the best restaurant in town. Wild Cherry, Howard said proudly. I know the maitre d' personally. I arranged it through my connections. I felt my heart skip a beat. Wild Cherry? My restaurant? Fate certainly has a sense of humor. Wild Cherry? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I hear it's a good place. The best in Brunswick, Vivian confirmed. It's incredibly hard to get in, especially for a big event. But Howard has connections everywhere. Howard smiled smugly. Not just connections, Vivian. It takes money and a lot of it. It costs a fortune to rent a hall for an evening. A fortune we can afford, Sheila added, giving me an appraising glance. And of course you're invited, Alina, Wesley said with a visible effort. It's a family celebration after all. Thank you, Wesley. I'm honored. Really? Sheila hastened to intervene. There will be many of our friends there, important people, and you might have to, a little bit of conformity. What do you mean, Sheila? Wesley asked, though his face showed that he knew exactly what he meant. Well, darling, Sheila put her hand gently on his shoulder. I'm just worried about making everyone comfortable. Alina isn't used to such elaborate events. I'm sure your mom will be able to dress appropriately, Vivian added with a fake smile. Maybe we could help her pick out an outfit. That's a great idea, Sheila exclaimed. Alina, Mom and I could take you to the mall. There are some great stores there for ladies your age. I looked at Wesley, expecting him to stand up for me, to say something in my defense. But he just smiled awkwardly and said, That would be great, Mom. Sheila just wants to help. At that moment, something shattered inside me. My son, my flesh and blood, was allowing his wife and her parents to humiliate me, and even joining in on it himself. For what? For the sake of ostentatious wealth and status in the eyes of people who had achieved nothing themselves, but only used what they had inherited or gotten through marriage. Thank you for the offer, I said, keeping my composure, but I can handle the outfit. Suit yourself, Sheila shrugged. But don't say we didn't offer to help. The conversation turned to the guest list. They mentioned names of people famous in the city, politicians, businessmen, socialites. Sheila and her parents talked about them as if they were close friends, though I suspected that most of these friends hardly remembered their names. And of course there will be the Jamesons, Sheila said, turning to Wesley. Martin had recently been promoted to vice president of the bank. That's great news, Wesley nodded. We'll have to talk to him about the possibility of cooperation. I also invited the Harrisons, Sheila continued. Their daughter recently married the senator's son, can you believe it? They went on listing the names and accomplishments of their acquaintances as if it were a catalog of expensive things. I listened to them with a mixture of sadness and irritation. Is this really what my son considers important in life? The endless race for status? Superficial relationships based on money and connections? When the clock struck 5, I decided it was time to leave. Thank you for a lovely lunch, I said, getting up. But I have to go. So early? Sheila asked with ill-concealed relief. I still have things to do, I explained. Wesley volunteered to walk me to my car. When we got to the porch, he suddenly took my hand. Mom, don't be mad at Sheila, he said quietly. She's used to a certain standard of living. I'm not offended, Wesley, I replied, looking into his eyes, but it bothers me that you let her and her parents talk to me like that. They didn't mean to hurt you, he countered uncertainly. It's just that sometimes you can be too simple for their taste. Simple? I couldn't help the bitter chuckle. Well, maybe you're right. And about the anniversary, he continued, rubbing his neck nervously. Of course we want you to come, but there'll be some very important people there for my career. And you're afraid I'll embarrass you? No, he protested too quickly. It's just, maybe you could make a little more of an effort? Wear something a little more modern. I looked at my son, handsome, successful, but so alien. Where is the boy who once looked up to me with admiration? Who was proud of my strength and independence? Now he was ashamed of me, ashamed of his brilliant future. I'll think about it, Wesley, I said, getting into the car. I'll see you at your party. He nodded, clearly satisfied that the conversation had ended without conflict. I started the engine and slowly pulled into the driveway, feeling his eyes on me. In the rearview mirror, I saw him back at the house, his expensive empty house full of stuff but devoid of the things that really mattered. In my office on the second floor of the Wild Cherry, I was looking over the reservations for the coming week. My eyes stopped at an entry highlighted in gold marker. 29th, Hampton Roberts Family Anniversary Party, 24 people, VIP treatment. I gathered the management team, Rose, Phoebe, and Oliver. They sat in the chairs across from my desk, looking at me intently. As you know, we have a big event coming up in a week, I began, pointing to a journal entry. My son and his wife's wedding anniversary. The same son who doesn't know what you really do? Phoebe said with a slight chuckle. Exactly, I nodded. Funny coincidence, isn't it? Of all the restaurants in Brunswick, they chose mine. What are you planning to do? Rose asked as usual, getting right to the point. I'm not sure yet. I tapped my fingers on the table thoughtfully. But I feel like it's time to call it a day. Oliver cleared his throat. If I may offer an opinion, Mrs. Hampton, perhaps this is fate. Such an opportune moment for the truth to be revealed. For the truth to come out. I smiled. Perhaps, Oliver. We'll see how things develop. After the meeting, I went back to my regular duties. The day flew by. Meetings with suppliers, checking financial statements, tasting new dishes. In the evening, already at home, when I was making tea, the phone rang. My son's name popped up on the screen. Good evening, Wesley, I answered. Mom, his voice sounded strained, as if he was struggling with every word. We need to talk. I'm listening. It's about our anniversary. He paused. You see, we've had some difficulties with the organization. Did something happen with the restaurant? I asked innocently, knowing full well that the wild cherry was fine. No, the restaurant is on, but... He hesitated again. Mom, I'm really embarrassed to say this, but, Sheila and I thought maybe you shouldn't come. I remained silent, giving him a chance to go on, confused by my own excuses. Don't get me wrong, he went on hurriedly. There will be very important people there. Howard's partners, potential investors in my new project, even a couple of city councilors. Well, you know Sheila, she's so worried about impressing. You're afraid I'll embarrass you, I finished for him. No, I mean, he stammered. Mom, you're a wonderful person, but you're not used to these events. Your clothes, the way you talk. You'd feel uncomfortable around these people. So you care about my comfort? I asked with undisguised irony. Of course I do. He seized on that theory. You wouldn't be comfortable. Besides, we can always celebrate with you another day, family style. I understand, I said calmly. You don't want your unfashionable mother in modest clothes embarrassing you in front of your wife's rich parents and their important friends. Mom, don't say that. He sounded annoyed. You're exaggerating. Am I? I took a sip of my tea. Be honest, Wesley, was this your idea or Sheila's? He was quiet for a second. We both agreed it was for the best. I see. I sighed. Well, Wesley, I won't impose. Celebrate your anniversary without me. Thanks for understanding, Mom. The relief in his voice was almost palpable. We'll be sure to stop by the next day and let you know how it went. Of course, I replied in a steady voice. Have a good evening. I hung up the phone and sat looking out the window at the darkening sky for a long time. The tea in my cup was getting cold, but I didn't notice it. Something inside me had finally broken. That last thread of hope that my son would one day see me as something more than a burden. The next morning, I called Rose. I need you to organize an emergency meeting. You, me, Phoebe, and Oliver. Tonight at 10. Is something wrong? I could hear the concern in her voice. You could say that, I answered. I'd made a decision. At 10 o'clock, we gathered in my office. I told them about my conversation with my son yesterday, without hiding any of the unpleasant details. And now, I concluded, I want you to help me organize a little surprise for my family. Phoebe leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. It would be my pleasure, Elena. What's on your mind? On the day of the gala, I'm going to show up at the restaurant not as a guest, but as the owner. I smiled. It's time to take off the mask. That's great, Phoebe exclaimed. It's about time we put these snobs in their place. Rose was more restrained. Elena, are you sure? This could have serious consequences for your relationship with your son. Do we have a real relationship now? I asked bitterly. My son is ashamed of me. His wife and her parents look down on me. What do I have to lose? Oliver, who had been silent until now, raised his hand. If I may, I have an idea how to make this moment especially memorable. I'm all ears, Oliver. What if during the gala, when toasts are usually made, Phoebe came out into the hall and thanked you as the owner for your many years of running the restaurant, publicly, in front of all the guests? A rare smile appeared on his face for the always reserved maitre d'. It will be spectacular, Rose said with a slight smile. I like it, I agreed. But on one condition, I don't want it to seem like revenge or humiliation, just the truth, which was long overdue. The next week flew by in preparation. I personally went over the menu for the gala, making sure only the best food and wines would be served. No matter what, it was my only son's wedding anniversary, and I wanted everything to go perfectly. The evening of the 29th came unexpectedly quickly. I chose for this occasion an elegant black dress from a famous designer, which for years was stored in a special case in the depths of the closet. I completed the look with a pearl necklace with a diamond clasp, a gift from Bradley for our last anniversary. My makeup was understated but flawless, and my hair was styled in a simple but elegant style. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I was surprised to find that I wasn't nervous at all. It was as if the years of pretending were over, and I could finally be myself, Alina Hampton, who had created one of the best restaurants in town, not poor Wesley's mother. I arrived at the restaurant an hour before the gala began. Rose met me at the service entrance. You look amazing, she said with genuine admiration. Wesley won't recognize you. Thank you, I smiled. Is everything ready? Everything's on schedule. The guests will start arriving in 30 minutes. Phoebe's prepared the special menu, and Oliver's briefed the staff. Your table is ready, in the corner where you'll have a clear view of the entire room, but you won't be noticed right away. Great, I nodded. Then we'll begin our little performance. I took my seat at a secluded table, ordered a glass of champagne, and watched the guests arrive. Most of them I knew. Big businessmen, politicians, the cream of society in Brunswick. They all greeted each other with exaggerated cordiality, exchanging compliments and the latest gossip. At 7 o'clock arrived the main culprits of the celebration, Wesley and Sheila, glowing with pride. Sheila's parents, Howard and Vivian, followed them, looking like people accustomed to luxury and attention. Oliver personally escorted them to the center table, which was set with the utmost care. I watched my son look around the room with an important look, nodding condescendingly to the waiters, whispering something in Sheila's ear that made her laugh. They looked like the perfect couple from a glossy magazine, beautiful, successful, impeccably dressed. But I could see the falseness in their smiles, the tension in the way they held themselves, as if they were always waiting for others to judge them. The evening went on as usual. Dainty dishes were served, expensive wine was poured, toasts were made to the health and happiness of the young couple. I remained unnoticed in my corner, watching the event with a slight sadness. Even on such an important day, my son never once mentioned me in his thank you speech as if I didn't exist. After dessert, Oliver announced that the chef of the restaurant wanted to personally congratulate the guests. Phoebe appeared in the room in an immaculate white tunic, which was unusual in itself. She rarely left the kitchen during service. Honored guests, she began in a loud, confident voice, I would like to thank the Hampton Roberts family for choosing Wild Cherry for their special day. We are honored to host you. The guests applauded politely. Wesley and Sheila exchanged smug smiles. But today I want to say a special thank you to the man without whom this restaurant would not be what it is today, Phoebe continued. To the man who founded Wild Cherry over 30 years ago and turned it into the crown jewel of our city's gastronomic world. To the man whose vision, hard work, and impeccable taste define every detail of your experience today. I saw Howard frown, clearly perplexed as to who he was talking about. Wesley looked bored, as if waiting for the formal part to be over. Ladies and gentlemen, Phoebe paused dramatically. Let me introduce the true soul of the Wild Cherry, its creator and owner, Mrs. Alina Hampton. Silence hung in the hall. Phoebe turned in my direction and gestured for me to join her. I rose slowly, feeling the stares of everyone present. With a perfectly straight back and a slight smile, I made my way to the center of the room. Wesley's face contorted with shock. He opened his mouth but couldn't utter a word. Sheila went pale, her eyes widening with horror and disbelief. Howard looked as if he'd been kicked in the butt, and Vivian clung to the edge of the table as if afraid of falling. "Good evening," I said, addressing all the guests. "I am indeed Alina Hampton, owner of the Wild Cherry, and tonight I am especially pleased to welcome my family here." I turned to the table where a stunned Wesley, Sheila, and her parents sat. My son Wesley and his beautiful wife Sheila are celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary today. 5 years of happiness that I have had the pleasure of observing, albeit somewhat from afar. A surprised whisper spread through the room. The guests looked from me to Wesley and back again, obviously trying to make sense of what was happening. "Mom," Wesley finally squeezed out, his face crimson with embarrassment and confusion. "What's going on?" "Just the truth, honey," I answered calmly. "The truth that you never bothered to find out." Phoebe handed me a glass of champagne and I raised it. To 5 years of Wesley and Sheila's marriage, and to the truth which, as you know, always comes out sooner or later. The guests raised their glasses hesitantly, clearly unsure of how to react to this unexpected situation. I took a sip and returned the glass to Phoebe. "Now, please continue to celebrate. All expenses, of course, are on the house, in honor of my son and his beautiful wife." With those words, I headed for the exit, in absolute silence, broken only by the clatter of my heels on the marble floor. I left the room, leaving behind the stunned guests and the shocked family. Once in my office, I sank into a chair and took a deep breath. The shivers I'd been holding back all this time finally broke through. I felt neither triumph nor gloating, just a strange sense of release, as if the weight of years of pretense had finally fallen from my shoulders. A few minutes later, the door opened and Wesley appeared on the doorstep, pale and confused, looking nothing like the confident man he'd been only half an hour before. "Mom," his voice trembled. "What does all this mean? You own the Wild Cherry?" "Yes, Wesley," I gestured for him to sit down. 32 years now. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" He sank into the chair across from me, looking at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. "Did you ever ask?" I answered quietly. "Were you interested in my life, my accomplishments, my dreams? Or did you just accept the image you'd conjured up for me, a poor, unfashionable mother who needed to be kept away from your important friends?" He was silent, his head down. Sheila and her parents appeared in the doorway, all 3 of them looking shocked and confused. "Is it true?" Sheila asked in a trembling voice. "Do you really own all this?" "Absolutely," I answered. "I can show you the documents if you don't believe me." Howard shifted from foot to foot, obviously not knowing where to look. "Mrs. Hampton, he stammered. "If we had known. You would have treated me differently," I finished for him. "Exactly, and that's the point. After that memorable night at the Wild Cherry, I spent a few days in absolute solitude. I turned off my home phone, put my cell phone on silent, and forbade the restaurant staff from telling anyone about my whereabouts. I needed space and time to process what had happened and decide what to do next. On the morning of the 3rd day, I turned on my phone and found 47 missed calls and 32 messages. 23 of the calls were from Wesley, 15 were from Sheila, and the rest were from her parents. I didn't even bother to read the messages. I just turned on the answering machine and made coffee. As the coffee dripped slowly into the cup, I thought about that night. Wesley's face when Phoebe introduced me as the restaurant owner, a mixture of shock, shame, and disbelief. Sheila, instantly pale, wide-eyed. Howard, losing his usual swagger. Vivian, not knowing what to say for the first time in her life. These images came back to my mind again and again, but strangely they were neither satisfying nor relieving. The phone rang again. Wesley. I stared at the blinking screen, but took my time answering. Finally, the signal stopped and the answering machine came on. "Mom, it's me again." Wesley's voice sounded exhausted. "Please pick up the phone. We need to talk. I realize you're angry, and you have every right to be, but at least give me a chance to explain myself. Please. I'll keep calling until you answer." I sipped my coffee, feeling the bitter taste spread across my tongue. Explain myself? And what could he possibly say? What excuse could a man who'd been ashamed of his own mother for years have? The phone rang 7 more times during the day. Wesley 3 times, Sheila twice, and Howard and Vivian once each. I listened to all the messages without answering any of them. Wesley, Mom, I don't know what to say. I've been such an idiot. Please let's meet and talk. Sheila. Alina, this is Sheila. We're so sorry. We didn't know. Please call us back. We want to make this right. Howard. Mrs. Hampton, Howard Roberts, I would like to offer my sincere apologies for our previous behavior. Perhaps we could discuss it over lunch, any place of your choice, of course. Vivian. Alina, dear, this is Vivian. I just wanted to say how much we admire your accomplishment. The Wild Cherry is an amazing establishment. I've always told Sheila you're an extraordinary woman. Please give me a call. I'd so love to have you over for tea. Hypocrisy in its purest form. Their words, their tone, their sudden respect, it all made me chuckle bitterly. Where were the apologies and admiration when they thought I was a poor relation? When they looked down on me and made condescending remarks about my clothes, my house, my life? That evening I called Harold Finch, my lawyer and perhaps my only real friend. Tomorrow at 10 in your office, I said without preamble. We need to discuss my will. Is something wrong, Alina? I could hear the concern in his voice. You could say that, I replied. I'll tell you when I meet you. The next morning as I left the house, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street, Sheila's silver sports car. She was sitting behind the wheel, tapping her fingers nervously on it, obviously waiting for me to show up. When she saw me, she hurriedly got out of the car. Alina, she exclaimed, hurriedly crossing the street. At last, I've called you many times. I gave her an appraising look. Perfect hair, designer dress, flawless makeup, all the usual. But there was something different about her appearance. Gone was the arrogant confidence, the haughtiness in her gaze. Now she was looking at me with a subservient smile. I know, Sheila, I replied calmly. I have an answering machine. Wesley and I are so worried, she continued, nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. We can't reach you on the phone. You're not answering your messages. We wanted to make sure you were okay. As you can see, I'm fine. I headed for my car. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm in a hurry to get to a meeting. A meeting? She hurried after me. Maybe we could, if you need help with anything, Wesley would be happy to. I don't think I'll need his help. I opened the car door. Neither will yours. Alina, please. There was desperation in her voice. Wesley and I are so sorry. We didn't know. If only we had known. That was it. The essence of the whole situation in one sentence. If we had known you were rich, we would have treated you differently. I stopped and looked her straight in the eye. That's the problem, Sheila. You would treat me differently if you knew my financial situation. But does that change the kind of person I am? She opened her mouth, then closed it, finding no answer. I got in the car and started the engine. Tell Wesley I need some time, I said before closing the door. I'll contact him when I'm ready to talk. Harold's office was located in an old building in downtown Brunswick. The small law firm, now in its 5th decade, specialized in corporate law and asset management. Harold, a tall man with graying temples and shrewd eyes, met me in his office, furnished with elegant simplicity. Alina, he shook my hand firmly. It's good to see you, though I'm concerned about your sudden interest in the will. Has something happened? I told him the whole story. The years of pretending, the way my son and his family had treated me, the ill-fated evening at the restaurant, and the subsequent phone calls. I understand your frustration, Harold said when I was done. But are you sure you want to make changes to the will now, while the emotions are still fresh? Absolutely sure, I nodded. This isn't about emotions, Harold. It's about me finally seeing my son's true face, and I didn't like it. We spent 3 hours reviewing every paragraph of my will. I had originally planned to leave the bulk of my estate, including the restaurant, to Wesley. Now things had changed. I want to set up a trust fund, I told Harold. Some of the money would go to scholarships for young chefs and restaurateurs, another part to support small businesses in Brunswick. And Wild Cherry? Harold asked. The restaurant will be jointly run by Rose and Phoebe. I replied firmly. They deserve it for their years of dedicated service. And Wesley? I wondered. Despite everything that had happened, he was still my son, my flesh and blood. He'll get the house and some amount of money, I finally said. Enough not to need, but not so much that he won't have to work. Harold nodded, making notes. We'll be ready in a couple days. Anything else we need to discuss? No. I shook my head. Just one request. Don't tell anyone about the contents of the will, especially Wesley or his wife if they suddenly decide to contact you. Of course. Harold looked at me seriously. You know I respect confidentiality. Leaving Harold's office, I decided to have lunch at a small cafe nearby. Just as I placed my order, my phone rang. This time it was Howard Roberts. I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Hampton. His voice sounded unusually respectful. I realize you probably don't want to talk to us right now, but you're right, Mr. Roberts, I interrupted him. I really don't want to talk. But since I picked up the phone, go ahead and talk. Vivian and I would like to take you to lunch, as an apology for our inappropriate behavior in the past. Inappropriate behavior? I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. You mean your arrogance and condescension? Or the way you let your daughter humiliate me in my own home? Mrs. Hampton, we're truly sorry. You could hear the desperation in his voice. We didn't know. Exactly, Mr. Roberts, I interrupted him again. You didn't know I was rich. But is that an excuse for treating a person with disdain? Is my worth as a person determined by the size of my bank account? He was silent for a few seconds, clearly not knowing what to answer. Of course not, he finally said uncertainly. But still, perhaps you could allow us to make amends? A business proposition, perhaps? I have some promising projects that might interest you. That was it. Not just an apology, business. Now that it turned out I owned a successful restaurant, Howard saw me as a potential investor for his promising projects. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Roberts, but I'm not interested, I replied dryly. Not in the dinner, nor in your projects. But, Mrs. Hampton, good day. I ended the call and turned the phone off. The waitress brought my order a salad and a cup of green tea. I ate slowly, thinking about my conversation with Howard. His words only confirmed my thoughts. Their sudden interest in me had been motivated solely by money. Not remorse, not realization of my disgusting behavior, but pure self-interest. When I returned home, I found a huge bouquet of flowers and a box of chocolates on my doorstep. Attached to the bouquet was a card. Love from Wesley and Sheila. Please call us. I took the flowers into the house and placed them in a vase. Beautiful roses, expensive. You could tell by the quality of the buds and the design of the bouquet. Sheila always had a knack for choosing expensive gifts, but flowers couldn't make up for what had happened between us over the years. In the evening, I turned my phone back on and found a few more messages from Wesley. Mom, I know you're mad. You have every right to be. But please give me a chance to explain myself. I love you. I really do. Mom, Sheila says she saw you this morning. Why aren't you answering your cell phone? We're worried. Mom, I'm coming over tomorrow. We need to talk face to face. That last message made me tense up. I wasn't ready for a face-to-face with Wesley, not now when the wound was too fresh. I sent him a quick text. Wesley, I appreciate your concern, but I need time. Please don't come uninvited. I'll get back to you when I'm ready to talk. The reply came almost instantly. Okay, Mom, I understand, but know that I'm very sorry and I love you. I put the phone away, not knowing whether to believe those words. Did he really love me? Or just my money, my status, my successful business? How do I tell the difference between genuine remorse and self-interest? The next day, I decided to go back to work. Wild Cherry couldn't function for long without my guidance, especially after such a vivid revelation of my identity. Staff needed guidance, suppliers needed contract confirmations, and customers needed reassurance that their favorite restaurant would continue to operate as before. Barely had I entered my office when Rose informed me of the unexpected visitors. Vivian and Howard Roberts are waiting in the lobby, she said with a slight chuckle. They say they want to apologize in person, and they brought a gift. What kind of gift? I asked suspiciously. A painting. From the looks of it, an expensive one. I sighed. Another attempt to buy my favor. a gift that was supposed to demonstrate their refined taste and financial means. Tell them I'm busy, I replied, and that I don't need gifts. Rose nodded, but then hesitantly added, Alina, perhaps you should at least listen to them. Not for their sake, but for your own peace of mind. I wondered. Maybe Rose was right. Maybe I should have listened to their apology to finally close this chapter. Okay, I finally decided. Let them come up, but warn them I only have 10 minutes. A couple minutes later, Howard and Vivian entered my office. They looked unaccustomedly uncertain, especially Howard, usually so confident and boisterous. Vivian smiled nervously, fiddling with the pearl necklace around her neck. Mrs. Hampton, Howard began, extending his hand to me. Thank you so much for seeing us. I shook his hand briefly and pointed to the chairs across from my desk. I don't have much time, Mr. Roberts. To what do I owe the visit? We've come to apologize, he continued, seating himself. Our behavior has been inexcusable. We have treated you with neglect, and for that there is no excuse. Alina, dear, Vivian included with a strained smile, we were so blind. Didn't see what an amazing woman you are. To create such a successful business, to run it all these years. It's only admirable. I watched them carefully. Their words sounded sincere, but their eyes betrayed their true feelings, a mixture of envy, fear, and calculation. They weren't regretting their behavior. They were afraid of losing access to the powerful man I'd unexpectedly turned out to be. We brought you a small gift. Howard pointed to a bundle leaning against the wall. A painting by a well-known local artist. We thought it would fit in nicely with the decor of your restaurant. Thank you, but I don't want any gifts, I said firmly. And if that's all you have to say, then our meeting is over. I do have a lot of work to do. But, Alina, Vivian pitched forward, her eyes looking pleadingly at me. We were hoping we could start over. Perhaps you'd like to have dinner with us, or we could attend a fundraiser together next Saturday. There will be some very interesting people there that you could... Vivian, I interrupted her. I'm not interested in social events or making new acquaintances through you. I appreciate your apology, but I don't think we'll ever be friends. But Wesley and Sheila, Howard began. That's another matter, I interrupted him again. My relationship with my son and his wife is our own business, and they are independent of my relationship with you. They exchanged confused glances, clearly not expecting such a firm refusal. Well, Howard said at last, rising, we understand. But if you ever change your mind... I don't think so, Mr. Roberts. I stood up as well, signaling that the audience was over. Good day. When they left, I went to the window and took a long look outside, watching them get into their expensive automobile. Vivian was saying something emotionally, waving her arms, and Howard was nodding glumly. I could almost imagine their conversation, resentment at my ungrateful attitude, plans for how to gain my favor, and perhaps my investment, regret for lost opportunities. I returned to my desk and plunged into my work, trying not to think about them. But my thoughts kept coming back to Wesley, my son, my flesh and blood. Did money mean more to him than kinship? Or was there some sincerity in his sudden remorse? That same evening, I received an email from Sheila, a long one, full of apologies and explanations. She wrote about how sorry she was, how delighted she was with my success, how she wanted to reconnect. And at the end, a request to meet, to talk things over. I didn't respond. What was there to discuss? Their attitude towards me changed only after they found out about my financial situation. That spoke for itself. The next day, another letter arrived, this time from Wesley. Shorter but emotional. Mom, I know you don't want to talk to me right now, and I understand why. I've been a terrible son, letting Sheila and her parents treat you without the respect you deserve. Shamed you when I should have been proud of you. I am unforgivable, but I'm asking you to give me a chance. One conversation, face to face. I'm not going to ask for money or help with my business. I just want to try to fix what can probably still be fixed between us. Love, Wesley. That letter touched me more than I expected. There was no mention of money or a restaurant, just an admission of guilt and a plea for forgiveness. Perhaps there was still something of the boy I had once known and loved in my son. I decided it was time to talk to him. Not now, Not right away, but soon. When I was ready to hear his explanation and decide if he deserved a second chance. A week after the truth was revealed, I signed the new will in Harold's office. Everything was as we'd discussed. A trust fund to support young talent, a restaurant run by Rose and Phoebe, a house, and some money for Wesley. Are you sure this is the final decision? Harold asked as I signed my name. I'm sure. I nodded. It's a fair distribution of what I've earned in my lifetime. What about Wesley? Have you decided to talk to him? Yes, I sighed. I've set up a meeting for tomorrow, at the restaurant, in my office. It's time for a serious conversation. Harold nodded understandingly. Whatever you decide, Alina, remember, you don't have to forgive just because he's your son. Forgiveness has to be earned. I know, I replied quietly, but I at least want to hear what he has to say. Perhaps not all is lost. Leaving Harold's office, I headed to the restaurant. I spent the day doing the usual things, checking accounts, talking to suppliers, tasting new dishes, but my thoughts kept returning to my upcoming meeting with Wesley. What would I tell him? Would I be able to forgive years of neglect and shame? And most importantly, would anything change between us after this conversation? I scheduled a meeting in my office at the Wild Cherry for 9 o'clock in the morning, a time when the restaurant was still closed to the public and no one would disturb us. I arrived early in the morning at 7:30 to prepare myself not only practically but also mentally. Rose, coming in with my morning reports, noticed my nervousness. It's going to be okay, Alina, she said, squeezing my hand reassuringly. You're a strong woman. You'll get through this. I know, I smiled gratefully. I just didn't think that at my age I'd have to go through such an emotional roller coaster. Emotional roller coaster. Life is full of surprises, Rose said philosophically. Do you want me to be there when they come? No, I shook my head. It should be a conversation between me and my family, whatever she was. At 8:55, the security guard called. Wesley, Sheila, and, unexpectedly, Sheila's parents had arrived and were waiting in the lobby. I hadn't invited Howard and Vivian, but they seemed to think it was a family matter for them, too. Show them in, I ordered, and straightened in my chair, mentally preparing myself for the conversation to come. They came into the office together, wary, unusually quiet. Wesley looked gaunt, shadows under his eyes. Sheila was as impeccably dressed and make-upped as ever, but her usual self-assurance was gone. Howard and Vivian stayed behind, as if they weren't sure they were welcome here. Good morning, I greeted them. Have a seat. They took chairs across from my desk. Wesley sat directly in front of me, Sheila next to him, her parents a little to the side. Mom, Wesley began, swallowing nervously. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I realize you're very upset and you have every right to be. I'm not upset, Wesley, I replied calmly. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. Of course, he lowered his eyes. Anyway, I want to apologize for everything. For the way I've treated you over the years. For letting Sheila and her parents. We want to apologize too, Sheila interrupted him, stepping forward. Alina, our behavior was inexcusable. We judged you based on appearances without bothering to find out what an amazing person you really are. An amazing person, I repeated, looking her straight in the eye. Was I an amazing man to you 2 weeks ago, Sheila? Or only after you found out I owned this restaurant? She blushed and looked away. I know how it looks, she said quietly. But I'm really sorry. We're all sorry. Mrs. Hampton, Howard entered, clearing his throat. I understand that we weren't invited to this meeting. But Vivian and I felt we owed you a personal apology. Our behavior was unacceptable. Yes, it was, I agreed. But you know what the sad part is? That even now you don't realize what exactly your mistake was. You think the problem is that you didn't give me the respect I deserve because you didn't know my financial situation. But the real problem is deeper than that. You judge a person's worth by their bank account, and that says more about you than it does about me. There was a heavy silence in the office. Wesley looked as if I'd hit him. Sheila fidgeted nervously with the ring on her finger. Vivian stared at the floor, and Howard fidgeted awkwardly in his chair. Mom, Wesley finally said, you're right. I was acting like an idiot. Blinded by, I don't even know what I was blinded by. The desire to impress? Fear that I wouldn't be accepted in certain circles? But that's no excuse. I should have seen you first and foremost as my mother, the person who gave me life and everything I have. Whether you live in a mansion or a modest house. His words sounded sincere, and for a moment I felt that familiar motherly urge to forgive, to hug, to tell me everything would be all right. But then I remembered the years of neglect, his shame for me, his words, "Don't come to the party, you'll embarrass me." And my heart closed again. "I appreciate what you said, Wesley," I said in a flat voice. "But apologizing is only the beginning. Real remorse comes from a change in behavior, and that takes time." "Of course," he nodded quickly. "I'm ready to prove to you that I can change, that I can be a better son." Sheila put her hand on his shoulder for support. "We're both ready, Alina. We want to be a part of your life, to really get to know you." I looked at her carefully. There was something like sincerity in her eyes, but there was something else in there, too, a calculation, a hope for gain. It's hard to say for sure. "I invited you here today not only to apologize," I said, shifting my gaze from one face to the other, "but also to inform you of the decision I've made about my business and my assets." They tensed visibly. Howard stepped forward, his eyes suddenly bright with interest. Vivian straightened in her chair. Sheila glanced quickly at Wesley, and he clasped his fingers together, trying to hide his excitement. "I revised my will last week," I continued. "I want you to know my plans not from legal documents, but from me." "Mom," Wesley held up his hand, "we don't have to talk about this now. It's your own business and—" "No, Wesley," I stopped him. "I want this to be clear. No loose ends, no false expectations." I pulled a file from my desk drawer, a copy of my new will. "Wild Cherry is my life's work. I built this restaurant from the ground up, with my own hands, with your father. Every detail here bears the imprint of my soul. And I want that after my death, the restaurant will remain in the hands of those who really appreciate and understand it." I paused, watching their reactions. Wesley turned pale, apparently beginning to realize what I was getting at. "I set up a trust fund," I continued. "After I die, Wild Cherry will be jointly managed by Rose Ames and Phoebe Nightingale, my longtime colleagues and confidants. They've worked here for over 15 years each and know the business inside and out." "What?" Sheila couldn't contain her exclamation. "But it's a family business. It should stay in the family." "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you consider it a family business until recently? Did you, Sheila, or you, Wesley, ever ask me what I do? Asked about my work, my plans, my accomplishments?" They were silent, unable to find an answer. "Exactly," I nodded. "To you, I was just poor Wesley's mom, living on a modest pension. You never saw me as a person with my own life, my own ambitions, my own successes. So why do you now think you're entitled to the fruits of my labor?" "But, Elena," Howard interposed, "your son is your own flesh and blood. Who else but he can carry on your work?" "Wesley doesn't know anything about the restaurant business," I replied calmly. "He's never shown any interest in it. And let me be frank, Mr. Roberts, I'm not sure his sudden interest in the Wild Cherry is due to anything other than its financial value." "That's not fair, Mother," Wesley objected, his voice trembling. "I could have learned. I could be a part of this business, working with you." "You could," I agreed, "if you'd shown interest sooner, instead of after you found out how much it cost." "And what are you leaving us?" Sheila asked, not hiding her disappointment. "Nothing?" I stared at her for a long moment, wondering at her unconcealed greed. Even now, after everything that had happened, she was only thinking about money. "Wesley's getting the house on Barrett Avenue," I answered. "The one you've always criticized so much, and a certain amount of money enough to live comfortably, but not luxuriously." "A house!" Sheila couldn't hide her disappointment. "But it was so small and old-fashioned." "Old-fashioned but cozy," I smiled. "And completely paid for, no mortgage. A lot of people would be happy to inherit something like that." "And the rest of the money?" Howard asked, unable to restrain his curiosity. "Besides the restaurant, you must have considerable savings." "Howard," Vivian shushed him, but it was evident that she was interested in the same question. "Part of my savings will go toward a scholarship fund for young chefs and restaurateurs," I said. The other part is going to support small businesses in Brunswick. I want my money to help those who really want to work and create something with their hands, not just enjoy the fruits of others' labor." There was a heavy silence. Wesley looked at me with an expression that was a mixture of shock, resentment, and, I thought, a glimmer of understanding. Sheila looked like she'd been punched. Howard and Vivian exchanged confused glances. "Mom," Wesley finally said, his voice muffled, "do you really hate us so much? Hate me so much?" "I don't hate you, Wesley," I said softly. "You're my son, and I'll always love you. But love doesn't mean blind forgiveness or indulging selfishness. Sometimes love is about allowing a person to face the consequences of their actions and perhaps learn a lesson." "What lesson?" he asked bitterly. "That you can't even trust your own mother?" "No," I shook my head. "That you can't judge people by their outward wealth. That a person's real value is not in his bank account, but in his character, his actions, his attitude toward others. It's a lesson your father and I have tried to teach you since you were a child. It's a shame it wasn't learned." Wesley lowered his head, unable to find the words to answer. Sheila looked as if she were about to cry, not with remorse, but with frustration and anger. "You can't do this," she said at last, clenching her fists. "It's not fair. After everything Wesley has done for you." "What exactly has Wesley done for me, Sheila?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Visit once a month out of obligation? Embarrass me in front of his friends? Ask me not to come to your anniversary so I wouldn't embarrass him?" She didn't know what to say. "I realize you're all disappointed," I continued, addressing all four of them. "You had hoped for a very different outcome to this meeting. But I'd like you to think about why you're so upset with my decision. Is it because you really care about me and my legacy? Or because you were hoping for financial gain?" "Alina." Vivian rose from her seat, her face a mixture of resentment and indignation. "We came here with a sincere apology. And you've turned it into a public humiliation." "Humiliation?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "I was simply informing you of my decision regarding my own property. If you see it as a humiliation, perhaps you should think about why you're reacting that way." Howard stood up too, his face flushed. "Come on, Vivian, we're not welcome here." Sheila followed suit, giving me an angry look. "You're going to regret this, Alina. We could have been a real family." "We were a family, Sheila," I said calmly. "Just not the kind of family you want now." They headed for the exit. Wesley remained seated, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite pinpoint. Resentment? Regret? Realization? "Are you coming, Wesley?" Sheila asked sharply, stopping at the door. He rose slowly. "Yes, I'm coming." But before he followed his wife, he turned to me. "Mom, I understand that you're angry, and you probably have a right to be. But is there really no turning back? No way to make things right?" I looked at my son, a grown man who seemed to be just now beginning to realize the real consequences of his actions. "There's always a way, Wesley," I answered quietly. "But it doesn't start with waiting for an inheritance, but with a sincere desire to change. If you really want to repair our relationship, not for money or status, but because I'm your mother and you love me, my door is always open, but on my terms, not yours." He nodded, as if accepting that answer, and followed his wife and her parents out the door. When the door closed behind them, I let myself take a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. A strange feeling came over me. Not triumph, not gloating, but a quiet confidence that I had done the right thing. For the first time in years, I felt completely free of the burden of pretense and unspoken grievances. A few minutes later, Rose came into the office. "Is everything all right?" I watched them leave. They didn't look happy. "Everything's fine," I smiled. "It's just hard for some people to accept the truth, especially when it doesn't match their expectations." "So what now?" she asked, taking a seat in the chair that Wesley had recently occupied. "Now?" I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the street where Brunswick's normal life was going on. "Now we continue to do what we've always done, run the best restaurant in town. Only now I won't be hiding anymore." "Sounds great," Rose smiled. "What about Wesley and his family?" "Time will tell," I shrugged. "If their interest in me was based on money alone, they'd be out of my life as quickly as they'd appeared. If there was any sincerity in what they said, maybe one day we can start over. On an honest basis. That night, for the first time in years, I appeared in the dining room of the Wild Cherry, not as a secret observer, but as an open owner. I went around the tables, talked to guests, accepted compliments and thank yous. Many of the regulars were surprised to learn who I was, but their respect and warmth only reinforced the idea that I had been living in the shadows for too long. 2 weeks after our conversation, Wesley sent me a letter, not an email, but a real handwritten paper letter. There was no mention of the inheritance or the restaurant, just a sincere apology and a request for another meeting, this time alone, without Sheila and her parents. I agreed, but made the appointment not at the restaurant, but at a neutral place, a small cafe on the outskirts of town. I don't know what this new beginning will bring. Whether we will be able to restore what was destroyed by years of estrangement and misunderstanding. But I do know one thing for sure. I will no longer live a double life. I will not hide my accomplishments or diminish my worth for the sake of someone else's comfort. I am Alina Hampton, owner of Wild Cherry, a woman who created a successful business with her own hands. And now the whole world will know it. And as for Wesley and his family, they learned an important lesson. The true worth of a person is not measured in money. And that lesson cost them a fortune. Is that fair? Probably not. But life is rarely fair. It simply offers us lessons we must learn to become better people. I continue to run Wild Cherry now openly, with pride in what I've created. Every morning I come into the restaurant not through the side entrance but through the main entrance, say hello to the staff, discuss the menu with Phoebe, the finances with Rose, guest service with Oliver. I'm no longer hiding or pretending. And in this new open life, I've finally found what I've been looking for all these years. Not just success or recognition, but true freedom to be myself, without masks or excuses. And Wesley, well, he now has a chance to prove that he truly regrets his past behavior. Not for the sake of inheritance or money, but for the sake of restoring a real, sincere relationship between mother and son. Whether he'll be able to take advantage of it, time will tell. But one thing I do know is that my doors are open to true love and respect, but forever closed to self-interest and pretense. And therein lies perhaps the most important legacy I can leave. Not money or possessions, but the lesson that a person's true worth is not determined by his wealth, but by his character, his actions, and his ability to see real value in others.